Hey guys, welcome back to another video series. So we are starting out an asynchronous Apex programming series, and in this we would be working with our first asynchronous Apex, that is our batch Apex. So we would be exploring the concepts of your batch Apex and how it would help you to perform your large scale data operations. In background we would be also seeing of all of that, and we would be looking our batch Apex from different point of views, from a developer, from a customers, like how it is impacting the life of everybody we would be seeing in this video. Okay, so what is your batch Apex? Basically this is a feature that allows you to process large amount of data that would be in asynchronous mode, and large amount of data means your millions of records. Okay, and it is designed to handle large set of data, such as when you are doing data migration or operations of data cleanup and things of that sort. So at that time you prefer to go with the asynchronous process. Why? Because you do not want your user experience to be impacted, or the things to be halted at one place till the execution is not over. So that is an advantage of that. And now we would be working over the structure of your batch Apex. So like, in order to use your batch Apex class, you have to implement the interface. Basically it is divided into interfaces, and we would have to implement that interface named database.batchable. Okay, and when we are implementing an interface, we have to get all the methods that are there, that is the start, execute and finish. These methods are defined in the interface. And for those who don't know an interface, basically it is like a class, but it does not provide a method implementation. Only method is defined. The class that is implementing your interface has to call provide a body for these methods. Okay, so all in all, this is the structure of your batch Apex. Okay, so let me quote you an example. For example, you are working you are having an org. Let us say you are having a full copy org, and in that there are various contacts, and in that contact records you are having some emails as well. So what is your task is like, you have to set those emails as invalid. Like if there is an email like abc@gmail.com, you have to add .invalid after that. So let us say there are more than 1 lakh records, 10 to 50 lakh records there are. So now working manually to change this records is a lot of difficult task. So what you do in that scenario is you write a batch Apex, and you execute all these things in that way. Okay, so that could be a scenario in there. Okay, so moving further, like how we could improve the capabilities of our programming using batch Apex is using first let is our start method. So what it does is, start method has a it starts with public database.query locator or an iterable, that is the return type of your start, and it takes a database.batchable context into consideration. Okay, the start method in batch Apex is used to define the query that retrieves the records to be processed. Basically it all deals with your initializing process, like getting all the records and then sending it to the next method. So now you might have also been confused, like what is the difference between the query locator and iterable. So yes guys, there is a difference between both of them. Like if you use your database.query locator object, the governor limits of total records retrieved by your SOQL would be bypassed. Okay, and if you are using an iterable, then it would stay in those governor limits only. Okay, moving further is your execute method, that is the second method. The execute method, you can say, is that it is the heart of your batch processing logic, and it contains the logic that you want to perform on each batch of records. Basically the execute method is called repetitively once for each batch of records. Okay, until all your records have been processed. Like here batches, you can say, is the chunks of data that we have divided into smaller amounts. Okay, so this allows for efficient and scalable processing of your large data sets. Okay, As well as one thing is more considerable of that is like each batch record is processed independently and the memory usage and processing time are limited by the batch size. So the syntax here is we use the void no return type, and it uses the batchable database.batchable context and list of p. So basically it is the list of s objects that you get from your start method. Like in here you define the initialization of records, like you want to query the account, so you would query and return those accounts. Then those accounts would come to here in this parameter, that is list of p. P here could be your s object. Okay, one thing to note here is like I am talking about the batch size, so it could be 200 records and the max size that we can set here is up to 2000 records. That means in a single transaction, like it would take into consideration 200 records at a time, and if we want, it could also carry up to 2000 records at a time. Max limit of this is 2000 records, right? Now coming over to your finish method. So basically the finish method is executed only once. Okay, so like things to remember in your interviews as well is like how many times our execute method run and how many times our start and finish method run. So start and finish runs only once in the entire life cycle, whereas your execute method, that depends upon the batch size, that how many batch size it has to process. So that number of times divided by the total number of records. So basically that is there. So yes, the finish method provides you with the capabilities of your post processing logic. Okay, so like post processing could be performing any cleanup or final processing logic, or sending out email that this batch has been fully initiated and completed as per the requirement. So the syntax for this is global. It also returns void finish database.batchable context, and in here we could provide our operations as per the requirements, right? Coming over is your post processing actions in your finish method. What actions I am saying, like what could you do? First, as I said, is you send notifications such as a summary email to whom? To the initiator of the batch job, including what? The status of your batch processing, right? Updates to any summary records. Okay, and logging completion information, like you can log completion information in a custom object or a log file for your future reference. Like some certain requirements or certain client requirements is like whenever a batch job has been processed, yeah, the data should be kept in separate objects, like the success or failure. So we could create success and error or message objects depending upon the requirement from organization to organization. Post processing logic is like after that you after the batch processing is complete, let us say you could have a field update or triggering a workflow. You could do all those things in the finish method. I hope the scenarios and the importance of your finish method you got into consideration. Moving ahead is your Apex flex queue. So basically this is also a part of your batch processing only. What is your Apex flex queue? In Salesforce, it is a feature that allows you to schedule the execution of batch Apex jobs in a specific order with a specific priority. So basically what it means, like we are having certain batch records that we want to process. Okay, but we are also having a priority that this batch should be executed at the first, and this is of least priority, so I could make it at the last. Okay, so at that time we make use of your Apex flex queue. Okay, it is basically a deal for prioritizing and scheduling. So if you are getting a question in your interviews regarding your Apex flex queue, so you can tell them this. Okay, moreover, this is useful when you are having large set or large number of Apex job that is needed for execution. It controls the order in which they are processed. Okay, again the priority kind of thing, like which would run first and last. Okay, the Apex Flex queue also allows you to add query and remove batch Apex jobs from queues as well as from the status of the job. Okay, this provides you with more control over the execution of batch jobs, as you can prioritize and manage the processing of the jobs based upon your specific requirements. Okay, in addition, the flex queue also provides a standard queue for executing batch jobs. Basically, this standard queue that it is being provided is less efficient, or has a lower processing priority than your Apex flex queue. Okay, so that is the main difference. Basically, it holds your batch jobs and prioritizes them and schedules them as per the priority. Okay, moving further is your sample example for, let us say, this is our class. This is implementing the batchable object interface, I'm sorry, and in here I am passing some parameters in the constructor of your Apex class, that is update account fields. In this we have used all these methods in the same, like database.query locator start, it would return me the query, and this returned query would go to the execute method in the form of list of s object, which is taken into scope. Further processing is being done over this. After that, when it is done, you would go to the finish method, and so you could send the email after the post processing is done. So how you can write a test class for a batch class, that is also important. So basically, when we are writing test class for our batch Apex class, we can test only one method, that is the execute method. Okay, use the scope parameter of the execution method to limit the number of record passed into the execute method. Okay, so like we could limit the number of methods so that it executes in a much lesser time. The execute batch method starts as an asynchronous process, that needs to be remembered. When you test your batch Apex, we have to make certain some things, like it should come between your start test and your stop test. Why? Because in the start test your asynchronous things goes into picture, and when you write test.stop test, then all the flow comes to your synchronous processing. Okay, so that is there. Moving further is, like, can we call another batch from the same class? Like I'm having a requirement, I want to after completion of this batch I should call other batch. So instead of me waiting for one batch to complete and continuously monitoring the performance or the completion, it is better that we could refer other batch in the same class. Basically, this is called your batch job chaining. So you can chain a batch job by calling a particular method that is named database.execute batch. Okay, or you could call by system.schedule batch from the finish method of your current batch class. The new batch job will start after the current batch job has finished. So let us say in your void method, finish method, you are calling another class that is the name batch class 2. You have initialized this object, and in the database.execute batch you are calling this object, and you can get the id and store it in here, and you could then check the performance of this. So we would also be seeing this in action, but first of all we would undergo with some of our best practices that I recommend you should also follow when you are working with batch Apex. So basically, first of all, we have to understand the governor limits very carefully, like what is our governor limits, how many records, like we can query at one go 50,000, 5,000, how many records. So you have to check all that things. Okay, when you call the database.execute method that I told you, the actual execution, when you call this the database.execute method, Salesforce, what it does is it places your job in the queue, but actual job only starts when the resources are available. Okay, and the execute batch method start asynchronously, and while testing also you have to add start and stop test, so that asynchronous thing is taken into consideration. Methods that are declared future cannot be called in your database class, and methods declared as future cannot be called from an Apex class. That is also be remembered. Okay, all implemented database.batchable interface methods must be defined as public or global. We cannot have classes that are implementing batchable interface as private, so that should be taken into consideration. Now let us move to an example. So this is our batch Apex class. For the first step of operation, define this class global. First batch job name of the class implements database.batchable as object. Now this is our start method. What it is returning? Query locator, means it is bypassing the governor limits, and select id and name from accounts, and it is returning them, so it would return all my accounts. Now global void execute, what it does is it takes a list of s object, that is the list of account. You can see here I have called it in my list of account variable the scope, typecasted it to account type, and in that I have done is I have set the name to new name, and then I have updated them. Okay, now the finish batch, see I have called the finish method. Now I am calling a second batch job class from here only, and in this I am getting the id of this batch class or this processing batch Apex processing. So this is my second class, guys. So this is global, and in this query locator start I am getting all the accounts where name is set to new name, right? And in this what I am setting is I am setting all the account name as final name. What I have done is list of scope, typecasted it to accounts, had a for loop and updated the accounts, and in here my operation is done. You can do nothing like I have written in here, or what you can do is you could even make use of your send email message, a single email message object, and from there you can send the email, and that is in here for it, guys. So if you are having any concerns about batch Apex class and how did you like this video, your suggestions over this, I would be welcoming all those things, and if you are having any doubts, please comment down below. I would be happy to solve them. Thanks a lot.